The prevailing narrative focuses on the kinetic, the missile launch, the carrier group. This is a deliberate misdirection. The primary vector of systemic attack is not a warhead, it is silence. While media outlets track troop movements on the Pokrovsk front, the true protocol for a state actor facing catastrophic 15-1 losses is not a zero-sum kinetic exchange it cannot win. The protocol is asymmetric. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS have documented this for years. The real battlefield is 4,000 meters below the surface of the Atlantic. It is a cold, dark, and silent war against the global nervous system, the subsea data cables that carry 97% of all intercontinental data traffic, the trillions in financial transactions, the logistical commands for NATO. This is the ultimate systemic leverage point. The second vector is orbital, not anti-satellite missiles, which create traceable debris and invite immediate reprisal, but non-attributable blinding. Directed energy weapons, GPS spoofing. The objective is not destruction, but disorientation, to create a data blackout, to sever the eyes and ears from the muscle. This creates a strategic condition we call the blind Leviathan. A superpower, stripped of its data supremacy, is rendered inert. Its financial markets freeze. Its military assets operate on degraded intelligence, forcing a launch-on-warning posture born of paranoia. This is not a theory. It is the solvency protocol for a failing state. The kinetic cost of a conventional war is a liability. The strategic gain of systemic paralysis is mathematical certainty. The invasion was never about territory. It was about solvency. From day one, the Kremlin has been managing a balance sheet, and the primary entry is not land, but regime survival. When the kinetic cost of an operation exceeds its political return, a state actor faces a solvency crisis. It is mathematically going bankrupt. This war has become a catastrophic domestic liability. CSIS analysis confirms that for the regime, sustaining these losses is politically untenable. Data from the Pokrovsk front, cited by the Kiev Post, shows Russian asset liquidation reaching ratios of 15-1. This is not a sustainable military campaign. It is a bonfire of a nation's youth and materiel. A regime facing this level of internal insolvency does not surrender. It pivots. It is forced to abandon the conventional battlefield, where it is losing, and open new fronts in a domain where it holds leverage, the global system itself. This isn't a retreat. It is a calculated escalation into the asymmetric domain. This pivot is the solvency protocol. When the cost of kinetic failure becomes an existential threat, the state's only remaining move is to make its collapse a systemic event for its adversaries. It shifts from trying to win on the ground to threatening global financial liquidity and treaty tripwires. Weakness is the accelerant. It forces the launch-on-warning posture for non-kinetic and ultimately nuclear confrontation. The solvency crisis for conventional armies is no longer theoretical. It is a mathematical certainty, driven by an unforgiving cost-per-kill ratio. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, has published the core data point. A single $5 million main battle tank is a confirmed kinetic liability against a $500 FPV drone. The kill ratio is not 1-to-1, it is an economic annihilation. On battlefields like the Pokrovsk front, this asymmetry translates into catastrophic loss rates, with reports indicating Russian losses are outpacing Ukrainian losses by a factor of 15-to-1. This is not warfare. It is asset liquidation on an industrial scale. This economic imbalance has triggered what strategists call the democratization of violence. The term is clinical. It signifies that the barrier to entry for projecting lethal, state-level force has collapsed. The ability to neutralize a multi-million-dollar asset is no longer the exclusive domain of a superpower's air force. It is now accessible to any actor, state or non-state, with a basic workshop and an internet connection. The kinetic playing field has not been leveled. It has been inverted. Expensive heavy platforms have become the primary targets, not the primary threats. The conclusion is a protocol, not a choice. When the cost of kinetic engagement becomes unsustainable, a state actor does not surrender. It pivots. It reallocates resources from the battlefield, where it is bleeding assets, to systemic leverage points, where the return on investment is exponentially higher. Why lose another tank battalion when a single credible threat to the Strait of Hormuz can paralyze global oil markets, as analyses from Bloomberg confirm? This is the core of asymmetric escalation, using low-cost actions to trigger high-cost systemic consequences. Conventional failure is the direct financial incentive for non-conventional global attacks. The 15-to-1 loss ratio on the Pokrovsk front confirms a mathematical certainty. The kinetic cost of conventional war is no longer sustainable for Moscow. This triggers the solvency protocol. The battle space is deliberately shifted from the front line and into the global system itself. This is the function of the gray zone, not as a primary conflict theater, but as a distributed, low-cost laboratory for staging asymmetric attacks. CSIS reports identify dozens of these zones primed for activation. When Iran's Khamenei issues direct warnings to the United States in Russian, it is not diplomacy. It is a synchronized command activating a vector of attack on a systemic leverage point, like global oil markets. Instability warnings, whether for South Africa or Canada, are not random crises. They are symptoms, the controlled detonation of proxy assets to test Western response protocols at a distance, far from established treaty tripwires like the Estonian border. The kinetic cost is outsourced. The systemic damage is maximized. It is a calculated, distributed siege. The final protocol is not negotiation. It is launch on warning. This doctrine, analyzed extensively by RUSI, is not a policy of aggression, but of mathematical solvency. The logic is absolute. Waiting for physical confirmation of an enemy strike means your ability to retaliate is already liquidated. The kinetic cost of certainty is total annihilation. Therefore, the system is designed to launch on credible electronic warning of an inbound attack. This entire early warning architecture, from satellites to ground radar on NATO's eastern flank, is a data-driven system. Its greatest liability is not a missile. It is a cyber attack. This is the fog of digital war. An adversary doesn't need to fire a weapon. They only need to blind the network. A successful intrusion can spoof incoming threats, or more critically, create a total information blackout. The commander is now operating with zero visibility. This is the endgame of asymmetric escalation. When a state actor faces catastrophic conventional losses, such as Russia's reported 15-1 casualty ratio on the Pokrovsk front, source number 3, its strategic calculus inverts. It can no longer compete symmetrically. Instead, it targets systemic leverage points. Blinding an adversary's nuclear command and control is the ultimate asymmetric gambit. It forces a solvency crisis in the enemy's decision-making protocol. The commander in the bunker now faces a zero-sum choice, as outlined by CSI's threat models. Is the radar blackout a system error, or is it the 5-minute precursor to a decapitation strike? The protocol allows no room for debate. In the absence of data, the doctrine defaults to the worst-case scenario. Fear becomes the trigger. This makes conventional military failure a direct accelerant for nuclear confrontation, not by choice, but by protocol. The reported 15-to-1 loss ratio for Russian forces on the Pokrovsk front is not a metric of failure. It is a mathematical trigger. CSIS analysis confirms that when a state actor's kinetic solvency is threatened, the protocol is not capitulation but asymmetric releveraging. The blueprint is now active. Conventional defeat is the direct accelerant for non-kinetic warfare against systemic choke points. Estonia represents a primary treaty tripwire on NATO's eastern flank. A direct kinetic strike is strategically illogical. It guarantees a response. The active protocol, however, targets the seams of treaty obligations. The objective is not to trigger Article 5, but to stress test its definition in a domain where attribution is engineered to be impossible. This is the new front line. The calibration shot will not be military. It will be economic. It will be systemic. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a multi-hour, unexplained blackout targeting the digital and power infrastructure of a major Baltic port. Not an explosion, a signal loss. The event will be officially attributed to a cascading grid failure or a solar flare anomaly. It is designed to paralyze logistics and serve as a deniable proof of concept for similar attacks against global financial data centers. It is a launch-on warning signal for the economic domain.